hope everyone can hear me fine. Everyone can hear me okay?
Can you turn up the volume a little bit?
Yeah, turn up.
Yeah. And the mic also a little closer.
Yeah, it's good. All right. So there's some new people here. Could you just introduce yourself briefly? Anyone here?
So we have Tom.
Yeah.
Hi, Krishna. My name is Dave Avandas.
Dave Avandas.
Rasamundry. We're going to engage in Florida.
Oh, Haribol.
Haribol.
Welcome. Very happy to have you.
And everyone else is.
We have Lata visiting for the first time
Hi,
from
Krishna.
Strongsville.
Yes,
I believe she said she got a book from Marooney.
Brunswick.
Yeah, we went in
Brunswick. Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Brunswick. And then we have Tom, who's coming for the first time.
Hi, Krishna.
Glad to be here.
Just found us on the internet.
Wonderful. So thank you all for having me. I've been here. I think I came to one Sunday feast, so you're taking a big leap of faith on me. But before we begin with our standard prayers, I'd like to dedicate this class, this discussion to two individuals. The first is my father's spiritual master. Today is his Vyasa Puja day, his appearance day. He's also from Gainesville, so you may know him. And then also to my own spiritual master. Today, this is the first discussion on Krishna consciousness that I'm leading after his departure 4 weeks ago. So his mercy continues to,
And that is
His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. So
Who's your father's first
my father's spiritual master is His Grace Kalakanta Prabhu.
Kalakanta Prabhu.
Yes.
Hare
Hare Krishna. So for their pleasure, we continue this discussion. All right, so we'll start with the prayers. For those who are new, if you have a version of the Bhagavad Gita, then they're in the front section right here.
Page 1.
Page 1, yeah. Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kathamayam Dathati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurur Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsya Shri Rupam Sagar Jatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamsya He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripre Vanchakalpatarupyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. All right, so today we'll be reading from the 18th chapter titled Conclusion, the Perfection of Renunciation. So my understanding is we've been going through the whole Bhagavad Gita for the past 2 years. And so now we're almost at the very end. We'll be starting at text 33. So because we'll go through all the verses, I think the first one we'll do the repetitions, and then after that for time's sake. All right. So so on verse 33, it's page 681 in the hardbound book. In the softbound, I'm not sure what it is.
638.
638 in the softbound. All right. So we'll start off. I'll recite word by word, and then line by line, and then maybe one or two of you can recite. Tritya Yaya Dharayate Mana Pranindriya Kriyaha Yogena Abhyabhicharinya Triti Sa Partha Satviki Trityaya Dharayate Mana Pranendriya Kriyaha
pranendriya kriya
Yogena vyabhicharinya
yogena vyabhicharinya
Driti sa partha satviki.
driti samartha satviki.
So then I guess one Prabhu and one Mataji can read.
Drityaya dharayate
Drityaya dharayate
manah pranendriya kriyaha
manapranendriya kriya
yogena vyabhicharinya
yogena vyabhicharinya
driti sapartha satviki.
Drityaya daryate
Drityaya dharayate
manapranendriya kriyaya
manapranendriya kriyaha
yogena vyabhicharinya
yogena vyabhicharinya
driti sapartha satviki
driti sapartha satviki.
Drityaya dharayate
Drityaya dharayate
Manaha pranendriya kriyaha
manapranendriya kriyaha
Yogena yabhicharinya
yogena vyabhicharinya
Priti sapartha sadviki.
driti sapartha satviki.
So for the sake of time, we'll skip over the word by word. But if you have time, if you'd like to memorize these verses, memorizing the word by word makes it really easy to remember both the English and the Sanskrit. So I'll recite a little bit of English and you can repeat. O son of Pritha, that determination which
That determination which
is unbreakable,
is unbreakable,
which is sustained
which is sustained
with steadfastness
with steadfastness
by yoga practice,
by yoga practice,
and which thus controls the activities
and which thus controls the activities
of the mind, life, and senses,
of the mind, life, and senses,
is determination
is determination
in the mode of goodness.
in the mode of goodness.
So we'll recite the purport given by His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanaravinda, Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Yoga is a means to understand the Supreme Soul. One who is steadily fixed in the Supreme Soul with determination, concentrating one's mind, life, and sensory activities on the Supreme, engages in Krishna consciousness. That sort of determination is in the mode of goodness. The word avyabhicharinya is very significant, for it indicates that persons who are engaged in Krishna consciousness are never deviated by any other activity. So before we stop to discuss, we'll read two more verses because they're on the same theme. So one of you can maybe just read the Sanskrit translation and purport of the 34th verse.
Yayatu dharma kamartan
Yayatu dharma kamartan
Dritya dharayate arjuna
Dritya dharayate arjuna
Prasangena phalakankshi
Prasangena phalakankshi
Driti sapartha rajasi.
Driti sapartha rajasi.
Translation. But that determination
But that determination
by which one holds fast to fruitive results in religion, economic development, and sense gratification is of the nature of passion. O Arjuna. Purport. Any person who is always desirous of fruitive results in religious or economic activities, whose only desire is sense gratification, and whose mind, life, and senses are thus engaged in the mode of passion.
And then one more for 35, and we'll stop to discuss briefly.
Yaya swapnam bhayam shokam
Yaya swapnam vayam shokam
Vishadam madam evacha
Vishadam maradevacha
Na vimunchanti durmedha
Navimunchanti durmeda
Driti sa pathatamasi.
Driti sa pathatamasi.
Translation. And that determination which cannot go beyond dreaming, fearfulness, lamentation, moroseness and illusion, such unintelligent determination, son of Pritha,
O son of Pritha,
is in the mode of darkness.
he is in the mode of darkness.
Purport by His Grace, Srila Prabhupada. It should not be concluded that a person in the mode of goodness does not dream. Here, dream means too much sleep. Dreaming is always present, either in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance. Dreaming is a natural occurrence. But those who cannot avoid oversleeping, who cannot avoid the pride of enjoying material objects, who are always dreaming of lording it over the material world, and whose life, mind, and senses are thus engaged, are considered to have determination in the mode of ignorance.
Sorry. So these first three verses that we're discussing talk about determination. So as we can see on our wall here, determination is doing what needs to be done even when you don't feel like doing it. I didn't know that would be there. I just saw it now. But determination can be more specifically defined, not just in doing things even when you don't want to do it, but just your impetus, your motivation for doing them, why you do them, what's your energy going towards. So here the Bhagavad-gita, and for the past several verses, has been just defining different qualities in different modes. So we have, understand there are three modes: the mode of ignorance, the mode of passion, and the mode of goodness. We describe that in descending order. And ideally, even when we one of the verses later on will say that anyone in the whole creation is under these three modes. And all three of these modes contain some sort of contamination. Even goodness is not fully pure, but goodness is the best to get to. We can understand that if we want to go from Cleveland to New York, what's the best way to get there?
Highway.
Sorry, Cleveland and London. I messed that up. Cleveland and
London?
London.
You're late.
Airplane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even New York.
Even New York. I'm flying to New York this weekend, but
It's better than driving to Turkey.
yeah. Yeah. So in order to fly to London from Cleveland, you have to go to the airport, right? But just by being in the airport doesn't mean that you reach London. You can still, you can miss your flight, you can mess up at security, you can go to the wrong terminal. So many things can go wrong. But being in the airport gives you the best chance of getting there. In the same way, we can understand that even at the mode of goodness, there's room for improvement. There's something higher than that, but it's our best chance for getting to that higher stage. So Krishna describes determination from goodness and then going down, but because it's more fun, we'll start with the worst and then go to the highest. So this last verse we just read describes the characteristic of determination in the mode of ignorance. And this is essentially when we describe determination in the mode of ignorance, it's not actual action. In the mode of passion, which we'll describe slightly later, whatever we do, there actually is some action. But determination in the mode of ignorance, you don't even get to the point of action. You just stop at not acting. You say, okay, I'm going to think about it. I have this really nice idea, but I either procrastinate or I just sleep. I don't actually want to do it. Like signing up for an online course and then never touching it again. Those things we see are determinations in the mode of ignorance. We can't go beyond our own ideas. Ideally, we want to have goals and aspirations and actually follow through on them. It's no fun to just have a goal and then not do anything about it. So at the very least, we should start trying. So the lowest stage is when you have desires, but you never go past thinking about what you want. You never make an attempt to go what you want. In the previous verse, Krishna describes determination in the mode of passion that says, now you're acting on something that you want, but what you want is categorized on the material level. So we are attached to material benefits. So how many people think that material benefits are good? Just so you know.
You're okay.
They're
As
okay.
long as
Okay.
they're used in
Okay.
It's really iffy.
It's iffy. Okay. So everyone must be very renounced here. But yeah, so we understand that material benefits, they provide some relief, but on a temporary level. Krishna in the Bhagavad-gita earlier, he states that this material world is dukkalayam ashashvatam. Dukkalayam means full of suffering. The word dukkha means suffering. And ashashvatam means temporary. So this material world can be categorized as full of suffering with temporary happiness. So when we get material benefits, they either will bring us suffering in some sort of covered sense. Like those who win the lottery, they initially are like, wow, I just won like $10 million or something. But then they find about the taxes because you just got $10 million without doing any work. So the government will just really rack up your tax rate. Or it brings happiness that only runs for a little bit of time. Like, for example, if somebody gets intoxicated, right? They may forget about the world for a very short amount of time. They may enjoy alcohol. They may like enjoy it with their friends and stuff for a little bit. But then the next day they wake up. I've never experienced this. I'm too young. But the next day they wake up, they feel really awful. They feel sick. There's headaches, all sorts of things. We call it a hangover. There's so many difficulties. So whatever happiness in this world is either suffering concealed or it's actually just temporary. So when we have determination in the mode of passion, we are holding fast to these things that give us these purely material benefits. So ignorance, we're not even doing anything. But passion, we're acting, but we're not acting for something that'll give us permanent happiness. We're working quite hard for it. Like a good example of someone with determination in the mode of passion is a businessman, somebody like a CEO. They may be putting in 14, 15 hours a day of work and then sleeping for 4, et cetera, et cetera. But what are they eventually getting? They're getting material benefits, which is not sustainable. It's temporary, and it could bring even potentially worse issues. I just started work, as Prabhu mentioned, and my boss was kind of explaining why he chose his career path. And he's in a respectable position. He's like a group manager, but he said when I used to start working, I wanted to become like a vice president of the company, a CEO, etc. But then he said that as he met more vice presidents, more executives, he found out, okay, all these people are either in a bad relationship with their kids, they maybe they travel a lot, they can't come back home, all these other issues that they have. There are a bunch of health issues and all these things. So he clearly saw that whatever material benefit they were getting from being in such a high position, and this is a generalization, not everyone is like this, but whatever material benefits that they've gotten at such a high position are not actually fulfilling because of all the subsidiary effects that come out of it. So this determination that we are focused on purely material benefit is in the mode of passion. And now for the best part, the mode of goodness. So we've kind of described the mode of ignorance, which we definitely don't want. The mode of passion, which we should make a huge effort to avoid. And now the mode of goodness, which we want to accept in order to make further process on our spiritual journey. So Krishna describes in the 33rd verse, the first one that we read, that there are three qualifications, three requirements for determination to be the mode of goodness. So the first one is that it's unbreakable. The second one is that it's dovetailed towards yoga practice. And the third one is that the senses are controlled. So we'll quickly debrief and just describe all three of them, and then we will move on. So the first one is that it's unbreakable. It's not deviated. This is good for anything. If most people, when they start something, they don't intend on getting distracted. That's why I know a lot of people at work, they have it's like a cell phone caddy where they put their cell phone in like some sort of box and say I'll lock it for the next hour and they won't touch it. That prevents them from being distracted because they're trying not to get deviated. They're trying to make their firm resolve unbreakable. So we want to have strong determination, but obviously for more spiritual goals. There's one really wonderful example of this that I really think is a shining example of unbreakable determination. That's one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj. Many of you may know him. I've had the fortune of being in this association a few times, but in his early days, when he joined in the 70s, in the early times of the movement, at that point, sometimes parents of devotees were not as favorable. So Giriraj Swami Maharaj was the son of this, I don't know if it was a lawyer or a judge, some very, very rich man. And when he found out, his son is focusing less on the material and now focusing more on the spiritual, he told his son, I will give you $1 million if you come back and just be normal. And that's $1 million in like 71, 72. So that's probably close to $5-6 million now. Maybe more than that. I don't know. It's a large sum of money. But Giriraj Maharaj said no. He walked away from that completely. He said, I'm focused. I found this path, this spiritual path. I understand the material benefits are temporary and they just bring suffering, but I am going to focus on the spiritual path. So he walked away and said no. Even $1 million at that time, which was a lot more than it is today, but still a lot. He didn't fall for it. He said no. And as a result, it's worth noting that he built this magnificent temple in Mumbai and several temples across the world, which definitely are worth more than $1 million. So it all came back to him in the end. But the point is, when we have determination that's unbreakable, we're not going to be deviated by any temporary setbacks. Another wonderful example is Srila Prabhupada himself. We kind of see now like there's a lot of support. All of these books are printed. We can buy them online. We have different places, like last week, a lot of devotees went to the Sadhu Sangha festival. We have nice support for developing the spiritual path. But when Prabhupada started this movement, it was very, very challenging for him. For those who are new, Srila Prabhupada is the founder of our society that brings this spiritual process and makes it mainstream. And in those early days, he came at 69 years old, and he crossed 2 oceans. On that journey, had 2 heart attacks, came to the United States in the best city in America, New York. And he suffered a lot without any money, without any people, but he kept trying. He didn't give up when there was no initial success, and he kept trying. And now we have a nice community in many places, including Cleveland, and we've seen the benefits of that. But all of the benefits that we take somewhat for granted now are because of the unbreakable determination that Srila Prabhupada had to bring all of this practice here. So the second quality that Krishna mentions, the second requirement for determination in the mode of goodness, is that we should be sustained with steadfastness by yoga practice. So in the discussion about the mode of passion, Krishna says it's focused on material benefits. But by indicating the word yoga practice, now it's focused on spiritual benefits. And the reason for that's why it's in the mode of goodness, is that spiritual benefits are not temporary. Spiritual benefits last for a long time. There's a famous speaker in our movement, His Holiness Swami Bhagavan Keshav Swami, and he says that there's 4 things that people like to do the most in this world, and that is drink, watch a movie, go on vacation, or sleep. And he said that the issue with all 4 of these things is that at some point you have to come back. The only reason you do these things is to escape the world, but at some point you have to come back. For example, you have limited PTO. You can't just stay there for a long time. You have to come back. We already talked about intoxication, how those benefits are temporary. The movie ends at some point, and at some point you'll wake up from sleep. So, but we understand that spiritual practice, when you engage in spiritual happiness, there's enough of it, and it's not temporary, and it doesn't have subsidiary effects. So it provides solid bliss. So when your determination is focused on the right goal, then we can say that's in the mode of goodness. And the third quality that Krishna mentions is required for determination in the mode of goodness is controlled senses. It controls the activities of the mind, life, and senses. So how many of us have tried chanting japa before? Many of us, good, okay. How many of you have ever found it difficult to control the mind while chanting japa? Right. But how many of you have found it more difficult to control the mind while doing a different task? At least one other task in your life. You found it more challenging to control the mind, or japa is the hardest thing you've ever done. Japa may be very difficult, but we understand that as we develop more and more into our japa practice, into our spiritual practice, gradually we get taste for doing things. Our mind and our senses divert to whatever brings us happiness, whatever brings us taste. So when we're in a process, the spiritual process that does bring us happiness and does bring us taste, then it becomes really easy to control the mind, the life, and senses. If you're doing something that you enjoy, it's very easy for you to continue doing it because you like it. So that's the secret of controlling the mind, the life, and the senses. Um, there's another really good example of determination that is of someone who is controlled, and that is his name is Haridas Thakur. He's a saint, more recent. He came in the 14th, 15th century, so this is still recent history in Western India, and he was very pure in his practice of the spiritual journey. He would always chant this holy name that we were chanting before, and because of that, because his purity attracts people, and gradually there were some people who became a little envious. One of those people was like I think the equivalent of the mayor of that city. So he said that these like saintly individuals are known that they are very renounced and they don't fall like prey to like worldly attractions. So he said, if I can deviate this individual and show him like this person is actually a fraud, then I can ruin his reputation. People won't like him and they'll come back to me. So he sent like a woman to try and like seduce him, yeah, to try and distract him from his spiritual practice. But Haridas Thakur was so firm in his determination, so fixed in his vows, that he kept chanting. On the first night the woman came, he said, I still have some rounds left to do, so I will finish my rounds and then I'll satisfy you in whatever way you want. But by the time he finished, then like it was already the next day. So she left and then came back the next day, and the same thing happened on the second day. And on the third day, his chanting was so pure. He was enjoying the chanting so much that he was radiating purity, so much purity, that this woman who had come with ill intentions to try and defame Haridas Thakur actually became purified and started chanting herself. Her motivation was no longer to drag somebody else down, but was to uplift herself. And gradually she became a really wonderful saint in our tradition as well. And there's the rest of the story continues. But the point is, the senses were so strongly controlled. And when we practice the spiritual journey, the path of bhakti yoga, then gradually we get the taste required to control senses. Another example is if you're trying to make a poisonous snake not poisonous, if there's like a poisonous venomous snake just lying around and moving about, you can either try and like close the snake's teeth, you could try and run away from it, all these other things. But the best way to remove the danger of the venom of the snake is to take out its fangs. Because then even if it bites you, even if it could bite you, it could try all sorts of other things, you're not going to die, at least not from the venom, because we've removed that source of misery, source of danger. So in the same way, when we use our senses in the proper way and we engage it in a positive manner, then naturally it's easy to control because they're not going to do negative things for us. So I have until 3:45, plenty of time. Okay, 4. All right, so what we can learn from this, how we can stay in the mode of goodness in order to do these 3 things: have firm determination, and meet spiritual goals and control our senses and mind. Then we should engage in this hearing and chanting with the association of devotees. Many of us have probably heard in various different contexts, in school or in work or whatever, that like you are who you associate with. There's a reason why like people try to like end up hanging out with the same people that are in their same field of study. It's because those people inspire them to do more things. Like we always, like my parents were all, like when I was younger, they would tell like, okay, make sure you hang out with the right crowd, because if you're in the same like-minded association, then you will be pulled up by the people around you. And the same applies to the spiritual journey. Sometimes it's a little difficult to practice the spiritual journey. There's lots of allurements and we get discouraged. But if we're with other people who are also practicing, and that association inspires us. Like I'm very inspired by all of you. It'd be a little bit difficult to speak if I was just speaking to a blank room. But because everyone has come, then it inspires me to be more focused on my spiritual practice. if we and when we engage in the process of hearing and chanting this mantra, then we understand that actually we gain more happiness in this process. So if we do it with contact of other people who are doing it, then we can be inspired to taste the bliss more and more. So with that, we'll move on to the 36th verse. I guess one devotee can read. We'll go 36, 36, 37, 38, 39. So we'll read 4 verses, whoever wants to read. Yeah.
Sukham tvajanim trividam.
Sukham tvaidanim trividam.
Shunu me bharata sarva.
Sunu me bhartarshava.
Abhyasa dramate yatra.
Abhyasa dramate yatra.
Duhantanam cha nigacchati.
Dukhantam cha nigacchati.
O best of the Bharatas, now please hear me about the 3 kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys, and by which he sometimes comes to the end of all distress. For a conditioned soul tries to enjoy material happiness again and again. Thus, he chooses the truth. But sometimes, in the course of such enjoyment, he becomes relieved from material entanglement by association with a great soul. In other words, the conditioned soul is always engaged in some types of sense gratification. But when he understands by good association that it is only a repetition of the same thing, and he is awakened to his real Krishna consciousness, he is sometimes relieved from such repetitive so-called happiness.
Yes. Someone read 37.
37, continue.
यत्तदग्रे विषमैव
Yatatagre visham shiva.
परिणामे अमृतोपमम्
Parinaye amrutopamam.
तत्सुखं सात्विकं प्रोक्तम्
Tatsukam satvik proktam.
आत्मबुद्धि प्रसादशम्
Atma buddhi prasadajam.
That which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. Tattva. In the pursuit of self-realization, one has to follow many rules and regulations to control the mind and the senses, and to concentrate the mind on the self. All these procedures are very difficult, bitter like poison, but if one is successful in following the regulations and comes to the transcendental position, he begins to drink real nectar and he enjoys life.
38.
विषयेन्द्रिय संयोगात्
Vishayendriya samyogat.
यत्तदग्रे मृतोपमम्
Yatatagre amrutopamam.
परिणामे विषमैव
Pariname vishamiva.
तत्सुखं राजसं स्मृतम्
Tatsukam rajasam smritam.
That happiness which is derived from contact of the senses with their objects and which appears like nectar at first, but poison at the end is said to be of the nature of passion. Purport. A young man and a young woman meet, and the senses drive the young man to see her, to touch her, and to have sexual intercourse. In the beginning, this may be very pleasing to the senses, but at the end or after some time, it becomes just like poison. They are separated, or there is divorce, there is lamentation, there is sorrow, etc. Such happiness is always in the mode of passion. Happiness derived from a combination of the senses and the sense objects is always a cause of distress and should be avoided by all means.
And then 39.
यदाग्रे चनुबन्धे च
यदग्रे चानुबन्धे च
सुखं मोहनम् आत्मना
सुखमोहनमात्मनः
निद्रालस्य प्रमादोत्तम्
निद्रालस्य प्रमादोत्तम्
तत्तामसम् उदाहृतम्.
तत्तामसमुदाहृतम्.
Translation: And that happiness which is blind to self-realization, which is delusion from beginning to end, and which arises from sleep, laziness, and delusion, is said to be of the nature of ignorance. Purport: One who takes pleasure in laziness and in sleep is certainly in the mode of darkness, ignorance, and one who has no idea how to act and how not to act is also in mode of ignorance. For the person in the mode of ignorance, everything is illusion. There is no happiness either in the beginning or at the end. For the person in the mode of passion, there might be some kind of ephemeral happiness in the beginning and at the end distress. But for the person in mode of ignorance, there is only distress both in the beginning and at the end.
All right. So we previously discussed Krishna explaining determination in the three modes, and now Krishna describes happiness also in the three modes. So there's happiness in goodness, passion, and ignorance. But first Krishna describes that, like, he introduces this in verse 36, and Prabhupada in the purport describes sorts of hints at what's to come. He makes that bifurcation that we've discussed briefly about material happiness and spiritual happiness, saying that material happiness is temporary, it's not permanent, and spiritual happiness is fully blissful, and it's more long lasting and more permanent. But before we move on, I think it's fine to discuss why it's like that, because I mean, you can take what I'm saying on face value, but there's a scientific reason for why that is. The reason for why that is because we'll be happy where we are natural. Like we see that it's like this, it's a turtle in this thing, right? It's a turtle. If we take the turtle out and like ship it to, like, I don't know, like Phoenix, Arizona, and just let it sit on the ground, it's going to be very upset very quickly, because its nature is to be in nice cool water, swimming around. I guess its nature is not to be in a tank either. It's supposed to be in like a lake or something. But its nature is to be in a watery, cool environment. Similarly, we also have a nature. We're actually spiritual souls that happen to be in a material body. And our nature, being spiritual souls, is to be in spiritual environments and spiritual atmospheres, and therefore in spiritual happiness. If we are aiming for material happiness, that means we are trying to do something that's against our own nature. And that's like a square peg in a round hole. That's like putting a turtle in the middle of the desert. So because of that, when we go with our nature, which ultimately is spiritual, then gradually we can attain our actual happiness. So these three verses that describe how happiness may be in the mode of ignorance, passion, and goodness depend on how that happiness falls in how material or spiritual that happiness becomes. So the first is, or actually the last thing Krishna says is happiness in the mode of ignorance. So in the mode of ignorance, one faces no happiness when they're acting, and also no happiness really like much later after they're acting. An example, maybe somebody tries to hurt someone after they do something wrong to them. They may have wronged them in some way. When they're committing an act of violence against somebody, obviously they're not in a happy mood, because they're doing it out of vengeance, they're doing it out of anger, they're not in a good mood. So that right then, their action is in the mode of ignorance itself. However, when a few days later it goes in the news, so and so person was hurt, and we're doing a fingerprint scan, we're doing an evidence check, and this person who committed violence gets arrested. Now they have to be in court. Now they may end up in all sorts of environments. There may be all sorts of futures for them. So their happiness is not even, their unhappiness wasn't limited to just the moment, but their unhappiness actually pervaded way into the future. So we understand that actions and activities that don't provide happiness now, nor do they prep us for not having happiness in the future, are actually in the mode of ignorance. So that's something we should definitely avoid. Then Krishna also describes happiness in the mode of passion, where he says that right now it becomes happy. However, much later it causes a lot of distress. A good example of this we've discussed this a few times is intoxication. When we take an intoxicant, at some point there's a rush that's like a high, or you like all sorts of things happen. But then much later you may feel very like painful. You may be hungover. You may all sorts of negative things in the short term, and then also in the long term. Obviously, there's a lot of medical research describing the negative effects of drug abuse. And we see that, yes, whatever activity you were doing, it may have been happy in the moment, but in the long term, that wasn't a good decision. It's not good to, it didn't actually bring any permanent bliss for you. So, and Prabhupada gives another example in the purport that two young men and women, they may like try and engage in a relationship. And it doesn't always like come out as graphically as Prabhupada described, but at some point it may lead to other complications in their marriage or whatever they're describing. So initially they may have felt some pleasure, but then gradually there may have been some other inconsistencies that cause some suffering. So we understand that happiness in the mode of passion are including those activities that currently may bring someone pleasure, but in the long term bring somebody distress. And finally, Krishna also discusses happiness in the mode of goodness. So he makes an interesting point. He says that things that are now like poison, but in the end are nectar. That is happiness in the mode of goodness. So we should be viewing things in a long-term framework, not in a short-term mindset. So things that will bring us happiness in the long term, even if there's temporary issues, like this quote here, determination is doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like doing it. Ideally, whatever you should be doing is so that in the long term you'll benefit. Like, for example, somebody may be going to school and they don't like to sit and study for 4 hours. But however, when they study, they may put in the little bit inconvenience to study for those 4 hours and really sit down. And then after that, they may do well in their exams. And because they did well in their exams, they get more opportunities, they graduate with a better GPA, they get a better job, etc. And in the mundane sense, we can see that that was a beneficial thing for them. So happiness in the mode of goodness is taking on some maybe potential temporary inconvenience so that you have a long-term happiness. Like making an investment. When you invest in something, you lose a little bit of money at the very beginning, but gradually we understand that investment accumulates and you reap more benefits in the end. The applications on the spiritual path are that we have to initially follow some regulations, hold ourselves to some standards that may not be the easiest for us to follow. For example, so in our tradition, we recommend that we wake up early. So I'll just do a quick survey. You can put up one finger if you'd rather wake up at 4 a.m. and put up 2 fingers if you'd rather wake up at 8 a.m. So, okay, so I'm seeing 1. Okay, 2, 1, 1. Okay, so we're split. I see you in the back with a 2. But we're not holding you to that standard yet, Skand. But we understand that waking up early may not be easy for us. But gradually, as we follow, then we understand that waking up early is better, because when you wake up early, you can chant this mantra that we were doing in a really pure and focused manner. And that gives a lot of bliss. That makes your day better, makes your whole spiritual journey a lot better. It keeps you advancing, and it keeps you making spiritual progress, tapping into your ultimate potential. So initially, it was really challenging for you to wake up early. But gradually you got more and more excited for it. This will eventually lead us to people will be excited to wake up really early, which may seem like really, really odd. But there are some individuals that are so intense and they really enjoy the spiritual practice so much that they'll voluntarily wake up early. They don't need an alarm clock. I think I was talking about one speaker, Keshav Maharaj. He says that the best alarm clock in the world is purpose. If you have purpose and you are fully convinced of what you're doing and you really enjoy it, then you don't have to set an alarm with like 4 alarms 10 minutes after that. You don't have to hit the snooze button. You don't have to worry about that. You will wake up on your own, and you'll do things on your own. And gradually, that comes with the taste. When we make taste, when we start our practice, we may not fully enjoy our spiritual practice, but gradually, as we perform it more and more, then we will get more and more taste. The example is given that somebody may have jaundice. They may have some sickness, and when someone has jaundice, or at least some forms of jaundice, when they taste like sweet things, it actually comes off as really, really sour. But gradually, if a diseased patient keeps like eating sweeter stuff, they're drinking sugarcane juice, drinking like sweet things, gradually that disease goes away. And then they're actually able to taste this really sweet item. And they relish it. They don't think it's sour. They don't think it's bitter. So in the same way, initially, when we have to follow some regulations, hold ourselves to some standards, it may be a little challenging, but we can understand that if we follow these long term, like waking up in the early, abstaining from certain activities, all these things, if we follow them in the long term, they will actually give us more happiness than whatever we could have even imagined right now. So we understand that we should try and be in this mode of goodness. We may have to accept some temporary difficulties, but know that it's like an investment. You lose a little bit in the short run to gain a lot in the long run. So to put what we've discussed about determination or happiness in the 3 modes into practice, we can understand that we should not give up what we want most for what feels good now. Giving up what we want most for what feels good now is in the mode of passion, saying we'll focus on what's happy now, and in the future we'll face some suffering. But if we say, I'm going to pull it together and I'm going to hold myself to these standards, even if they're a little challenging, then we will say, okay, we can actually make progress that way. We push ourselves a little bit in order to allow ourselves to access a higher taste. Additionally, we can push through these difficulties, and I made this point briefly before, if we are in the association of like-minded individuals. Being with people who are also practicing it, who are also on a spiritual journey, will inspire you more and more. It'll allow you to share your challenges, share your successes, and just even being around people, even if you don't necessarily talk to them, even if you're just with other people, then it makes it a lot easier. For those who have been to like larger scale like festivals, some of these festivals have like a practice that they do a big kirtan at 4:30 in the morning. And some of these festivals also go really late at night. I think Sadhu Sangha went till like 10:30 was the last kirtan it ended. Is that correct? Oh, okay, yeah. So, yeah. So it was really, really late. And then now everyone's like, okay, let's wake up early again at 4:30 so we can attend this kirtan. Normally, if you went to bed at 11:30, it would be very, very challenging for you to wake up so early the next day. However, I watched the live streams and I saw those early morning things were quite well attended, even though people were late. And that's because they knew that other people would also be there. So that inspired them, at least I would assume that inspired them to try and get up early. So if we are doing things with other people, then it allows us to push those difficulties become a little bit easier because we're all in the same boat. We understand that we're all facing the same challenges, and it's easier to face those together. So before we end, we'll quickly go over this last verse. Would anybody like to read that text for you?
Natad asti prithivyam va
Natasti prithiviyam va
divi देवेषु वा पुनः
दिवि देवेषु वा पुनः
सत्त्वं प्रकृतिजैर्मुक्तं
सत्त्वं प्रकृतिजैर्मुक्तं
यद् एभिः स्यात् त्रिभिर्गुणैः
यदेवि स्यात् त्रिभिर्गुणैः.
Translation: There is no being existing either here or among the demigods in the higher planetary systems which is freed from these three modes born of material nature. Purport: The Lord here summarizes the total influence of the three modes of material nature all over the universe.
So we understand that these modes that we've discussed, and I'm sure that have been discussed for the past few weeks, are all pervading. That these modes, they touch everybody in this creation. But we have the choice to be in goodness, passion, or ignorance. And to tap our full potential, to the spiritual platform, it's best for us to be in the mode of goodness. We use goodness as a medium, as a means to get to the best mode. Like the example we gave before, Chicago to London. We may go to the airport, but the goal is not to just stay in the airport. The goal is that we get to our destination. So we try our best to be in the mode of goodness so that we can not stay there, but we can tap into our full spiritual potential. So to summarize what we've described, what we've discussed, we can develop determination in the mode of goodness by engaging in the process of bhakti yoga that will naturally give us a taste to control our senses and give us so much taste that we are not going to be deviated. And we can do that with like-minded people so that we're further inspired, even if it gets challenging, to keep staying on the path. And to achieve happiness in the mode of goodness, we should also have firm resolve that we don't have to give in to every craving, even because we see we have the foresight to understand what this will do to us in the long term. And also to stay in the association of those who are of a similar consciousness, who have similar goals, so they can keep us inspired when we may not be so inspired. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Any questions?
Any questions that we can answer briefly?
So I'll ask a question. So in 3.27, Krishna says, Prakrite Krimanani, right? Means you are not the doer, it is the three modes that are the doer. It's the three modes that is acting. Everybody is taking over the body, everything. So in here, we say about determination, happiness, and all those things. What is in our control? Because even the person, if he wants to do something, it is the three modes that is doing it. How can you then say that, oh, this person is acting right, this person is not acting right?
Yeah, so the three modes are the doer in the sense that when things occur, it's not necessarily because of us, it's because there's that's said in the statements that the three modes are influencing us. But that doesn't put us in a position of helplessness. We all have free will. Even if the modes are the ones that are executing it, we have the desire to choose what our practice should be. It's not that we're completely left to ourselves. We understand there's in the scriptures there's an analysis of how mothers of two different animals treat their kids. So it says that the mother of a monkey, the baby monkey, will hold on to the mother completely, and the mother will jump around. But the only reason that the baby monkey is staying on is because of the baby monkey's effort. It's holding on to the mother. But whereas the cat, how does the mother cat hold its child? It holds it in its mouth. So the only person putting any effort is the cat, is the mother cat. The scripture says that both of these are a little flawed. It's not that when we're trying to get to Krishna and we're trying to change our habits, it's not that it's completely our job to do that, or it's completely in the hands of somebody else. It's by both works and by grace. So we may have a certain nature, but by the mercy of those who are very much advanced in this process, they can help us change that nature. But at the same time, we have to be willing to do it ourselves. So by both the encouragement of those who are more advanced than us and also our own determination, we can change our nature. But it has to be both of them together.
in the world today, there are so many people that think their cause or what they're doing is right, even though it may be evil. I mean, there's so many causes right now that people are believing in, and they believe so strongly that they're doing the right thing, even though we may not think it is. I mean, that's how wars start. That's how things in this world happen, because somebody thinks that they're right, and they believe so strongly, even though they may be committing evil deeds. I wonder if those people could ever achieve goodness. I mean, it's just what's going on is it's crazy, and I don't think they ever will achieve any kind of state of goodness. I don't know. I just see so many people that believe so strongly in something, even though it's really not right. And there's a lot of them.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, as we described, this world is full of temporary happiness and permanent suffering, and we understand that as at least now we're in an age called Kali Yuga, the age of Kali, which is characterized by quarrel and hypocrisy. So we understand that these actions where people fight for the wrong causes, it's more mainstream than we would like. The reason that this comes about is that they think that their cause is right because they don't know who they are. They think that they are the body, and they'll do what's right for their body. However, what we described previously, that we're actually the spirit soul. We inherit a body, but we are actually the spirit soul. And as long as you're fighting for something that you're not, then there's going to be a disconnect there. But when we start recognizing who we really are, then it can allow us to transcend that. As far as understanding that it's difficult to perceive how people who may be acting so in such evil could ever come to a state of ignorance. It may be so that if we try to fight, if we try to use non-spiritual tactics, if we try to use material feel good things and try to bring people up, it may not work there. But because people are originally spirit souls and are spirit souls, then using a spiritual practice can actually trump everything else. It can override anything else. There's a very famous story in our scriptures. I'm sure it's the story of a Jamil. And it describes that he was originally practicing this spiritual path, but then gradually he kind of went away from it. And he left his family and met somebody else, and even in his business, he was using really unfair tactics. He was cheating people. He was I don't know the whole details, but it was really unspeakable crimes. And at the end of his life, when the angels of death were taking him away, he was shouting for his son, who is named Narayan, which is also a name of God, a name of Krishna. And because of that, he got some good spiritual credit, that he was given a second chance. And because of that, he was able to push through all his bad habits. He understood what he did wrong, and he was able to transcend that. So it's difficult to perceive how those who may be acting so evil could come to this position. But there's another verse in the Bhagavad-gita, I think 435, Bhagavad-gita Chapter 4, text 35, that says that even the most sinful among sinners, even the greatest sinner, if they take this up, it may be harder for them at first because because of their previous bad habits. But if they take it up with full determination in the right association, then even they can be purified. Because this path is so strong, this process is so powerful that it can overcome all sorts of evil. Does that answer?
Yeah. Thank you.
How can you make them take it up?
How can you make them take it up?
Yeah.
Well,
By example.
There's I don't exactly remember the exact Bengali of this, but there's one devotee who tells this. We were talking about Haridas Thakur earlier, and he tells Haridas Thakur, he says, some people, they have a good example. They do everything correctly, but they don't help other people do it correctly. And some people are really good at preaching. They say, you should do this, and they don't actually do it themselves. People who don't base their their teachings on what they're doing. There's a disconnect between what they practice and what they preach. But then he says, you, Haridas Thakur, you practice and you spread these teachings. So whatever you're doing, you're feeling happiness from it and you give it to other people. And because of that, you should be accepted as the best devotee. So we understand that if we lead by example, and then we also work we work very hard to help get people to come to the spiritual path, then eventually it will occur. We understand that Lord Chaitanya has said already that my name will be broadcasted. God has said that my name will be broadcasted throughout in every town and every village. And because he has said it, it's going to happen. But because God likes to give credit to his devotees, to those who are serving him, he allows us to take the headache of trying to make other people happy. He allows us to try and give other people their original happiness. If he wanted, he could do it like that. He could just snap and done. But in order for us to show that we love him, he allows us to work a little hard, put our brains together, put our energy in, so that we can express our service to him.
Thank you. Wonderful class.
Any other comments or questions?
I just have a comment on kind of what Ananda had said. I think it's really, really important at this time of the age of quarrel to definitely not be of this world. It's really important that we stick together as devotees. It's really important to be unshakable. It's really important not to get caught up in any politics, because it's all nonsense. Srila Prabhupada tells us what to do. We're given everything very nicely on how to act in this world by Srila Prabhupada. And I think it's really important to really be in ignorance of this world, because this world is it's all nonsense.
Right, yeah, we have to be very firm on, I think His Holiness Indradumna Maharaj quoted that it may be difficult to be in the boat of the material world, but if you try to have one foot in one boat and another foot in another boat, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So we have to be very committed in our position that we should, and that starts with strong practice. If we practice really intensely, then we'll be in a position to do that. Now, due to circumstance, maybe some of us work or some of us do these things, we may have to interact with the world, but we should be in this world, not of this world. We should be very grounded in this philosophy, grounded in our practice in order to be, as like you said, in ignorance of this material world, be above it all. So yeah, thank you. That's a very nice comment.
Anyone else? All right, well, let's thank Ranchor Das Prabhu. So loud, enthusiastic Haribol.
Haribol.
Thank you.